Okay. So I decided to do a little live stream because I have to record something later, and I need to, well, I would like to use this guitar, but it's missing a string, so I need to replace that. And that's a boring job, so I thought I would do a little Q&A while I work on that, just to make things a little more interesting. It's been a little while since I did one too, I think. I will try to keep my eye on the chat while I do this. It's a little harder for me to do that because I'm, looking at my guitar. What I should really be doing, honestly, is like restringing the entire guitar at once instead of like one string at a time. Because I just play, and then if a string breaks, I'll just fix that one. And it's the problem with doing that is that I fix it, and then I'll play for a little while, and then I'll break another string. And they would last collectively longer if I would replace them all at the same time. But you know what, Andrew? You're not wrong about that. Never thought of it that way. Did I get this out? I did not. Okay. What am I looking for? I'm looking for the Allen wrench. I haven't played this guitar in a long time. I think if I remember correctly, the last time I played this was when I recorded rematch for Memories of Summer, which would have been in September. So it's been a little while. Got to cut the ball bearings off of these if you're using a Floyd Rose bridge like I have, because they don't go in that way. I'll get this in and I'll check the chat. I may have missed something. I saw Tyler. Hi, Tyler. I think I probably put these in too tightly sometimes. Can make them more liable to break. Floyd Rose setups are very complicated. Okay, I'll check the chat. Yeah, not much. Yeah, I'm doing well. Got a bit of a headache. I think I have been staring at screens a little too much today. Why is this here? Oh, I didn't take off the... Okay. That would be important. The remnants of the string are here. There we go. That's the best chord. Wrong direction. How do I... There we go. Would you ever write pop? Yeah, I've written it before. I listen to a lot of pop music. I don't know exactly what kind of pop you're referring to, considering that, like, pop just means popular music, and that can mean any genre, really. But assuming sort of more of a low-key rock, yes, I've written it, I listened to a lot of it, and I'll probably write a lot more of it. Hope this isn't okay. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Music theory books, book recommendations, I have none. Sorry. I've never read one in full. There's a book called The Elements of Music by I forget his name. Jason Martineau, I think it is. I haven't given that a very in-depth reading, but I've kind of skimmed through it, and I enjoyed it, and it seemed to give like a fairly a decent glimpse of the basic elements of music. I've been looking into Paul Hindemith's I forget the title of the book. He wrote a book on music theory, and I've been looking into that, and I've been enjoying what I've read so far. I haven't read much past the introduction and the derivation of the chromatic scale. What's the break in time for guitar strings usually like? Oh, do you mean like how long it takes them to kind of like settle in tune? And I mean, I don't know, I've never really paid attention to that. Maybe a few days. Do I know how to play Through the Fire and Flames? No, I don't. It's too high above my skill level. I was wondering if in music theory you can take a series of notes from a minor scale and then play them alongside notes in a major scale, like, and vice versa, like A minor is the same as C major. So that's the concept you're describing is called how do I say this in a way that's grammatically correct? Scales which have that relationship are called modes. So in the same way that you would describe, so say you have a family and they have children, you would describe those children as being siblings of one another. If you have a scale which is made up of the same notes as another scale, they're called modes of one another. It's the same idea. It's a description of a relationship between those two scales. And yeah, you can play them alongside one another. You're just going to be harmonizing whatever scale you've got to begin with. Considering that you're not really going to hear dual tonics, it's not really going to be like, oh, you have C as the tonic and A as the tonic side by side, because polytonality, and that's something that Paul Hindemith talked about in the book that I mentioned. Polytonality isn't really perceived exactly. You're always kind of going to lean towards one particular note as the tonic or just not at all. I don't know that there's much utility in thinking of playing, in thinking of two sets of notes as completely different scales if they're actually the same thing. So, like, say you have D Dorian and you have C major playing side by side, and the tonic is D, let's say. Well, I would just consider that whole thing to be Dorian, D Dorian. I wouldn't split them up between D Dorian and C major if the tonic is just D the whole time. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm not entirely sure if I understood your question exactly, but that's what I gleaned from it. I should tune this. I'll check the chat and see if there's anything I can talk about while I... do that. How long did it take you to really develop your relative pitch perception? Like to the point where you can hear a song and know exactly what's going on? So, in a sense, you could say that am I taking students? I am. If you send me a message on Twitter or on Discord, we can try and set something up. I charge $30 an hour for lessons, and generally my students do like one a week. We pick a time and we just do one a week. But I'm super flexible, and some people do like once a month or do it just kind of sporadically. We just, set up lessons. We'll just do like a call over Discord or something, and we'll talk for an hour about a particular subject or whatever. They're all different, so like I'm super flexible with whatever you want to do. Anyways, to answer the question, you could say that I started developing my relative pitch to some degree when I started learning to play the guitar, because I would, be learning songs by ear, because I didn't have tabs for them, for the songs that I wanted to learn, so I would just learn things by ear. And that's, I didn't have words to put to the chords that I was learning. I just referred to them by their absolute frets, or maybe by the note names. But that's not really very helpful when trying to develop relative pitch. And so you could say I had a very minuscule amount of training when I started learning to play the guitar, which was in early 2009. I've been playing for 10 years now. And mid-2012, when I started kind of picking up music theory more seriously. And so I had a little bit of... I feel like you'd have to factor that in, because I already had like 4 years of experience, 4 years of experience learning songs by ear, and so I guess that has to be taken into account. But I wouldn't say that I wasn't at that point where I could listen to a song and know what the chords were exactly. So in late 2012, I started, early 2013, I started converting. I was learning some K-on music. I think I was learning Samidari 20 Love, which has a lot of chords. And I was having trouble memorizing it. And so I wanted to find a way to make it easier to memorize the chords. And I'll play it for you if I get this thing restrung. And I thought, if I just convert them to Roman numerals, then I won't have to think about the letter names, the note names, and maybe that would make it a little bit easier for me. And I don't know that it did exactly, but I converted them to Roman numerals. So for example, it's the key of E flat, so E flat's the 1 chord, and D flat is the flat 7 chord, and so on and so forth. And doing that, I started doing that all the time for other songs, partly just as a thing to do to kill time, because that, for some reason, I found that fun. And so I would just take songs that I knew and make those conversions just kind of in my head. And when I would learn new songs, I would analyze them and put down the Roman numerals and all that kind of stuff. And so I didn't set out to train my ear in that way, but it's kind of what happened, because what I was doing was I was giving myself names for the chords that were relative to the tonal center. and you don't need to know the name of the tonal center in order to do this, because you can generally recognize it. So yeah, I'm responding to Nolly. So I found over time that I started being able to recognize those chords when they came up again. So, for example, I would hear a 4 chord, and I would recognize that as the 4 chord without actually checking it on my guitar. Now, I didn't know exactly what chord it was exactly, so I mean, I wouldn't know what key it was in, but I could tell it was the 4 chord. So if I figured out what key it was in, then I could just play the 4 of that key, and it would be that chord, and that was correct. And so just doing that over time developed that ability, and it took me about, I would say, 4 months or so, 4 or 5 months of doing that on a fairly consistent basis, because it was kind of my only hobby, that composition and, you know, learning to play songs on the guitar in general. And I would listen to music, and I would, if I identified a chord, like a 5 chord, I would consider that as a 5 chord. I'd think 5 when it went by. And so just doing that all the time with music that I was listening to, I would say over a period of 4 months is when I started noticing that that it was developing my ear. I would say it probably took me about a year to get to a point where I was as proficient with it as I am now, I think. It's not something that I really actively practice. That right there, that was an out of tune major third. The guys in the Ongaku Concept Discord server, a few weeks ago, like there was a period of time where they were all kind of like getting together in the music theory channel on the server and sharing their and talking about ear training and sharing their results with some ear training tests and stuff like that. And it was kind of interesting to watch them do that and improve their ability to do that. So that was kind of interesting. I don't know how well it worked out for them, but you can. I think there's a link to the Discord in the description. You can ask them and see how that went. I should really be tuning this thing. I mean, I feel like that works if you're. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like that would work if the bridge was set to be like level to begin with, and mine's not quite. Figure where that sound was coming from. If it's this string, I forgot. I'll check the chat. Do I have an opinion on the minimum maximum frequency hertz you should be able to hear if you make music? I mean, so most people can hear somewhere between 20 and 20,000. But you don't really need to hear that entire range in order to be able to... I mean, I feel like having a wider hearing range is more important if you're like a mixing engineer. Maybe he's composing for dogs. Yeah, you know what? That's possible. I feel like having a wider hearing range is probably more important if you are mixing, if you're a producer, and you mix your own stuff, or mix other people's stuff, than it is if you're a composer. Yeah, a lot of the top mixing engineers suffer from hearing loss anyways and can't hear above, like, I don't know, 16, 17K. I mean, even if your hearing range is absolute garbage, it's like, as long as you're not tone deaf, I mean, those are different things. It shouldn't really affect your ability to compose, I don't think. 12K or so? No, that's fine. That's fine. Maybe you won't have the best judgment when mixing, like if you're mixing high level information, and maybe transcription will be a little more difficult for really high ranges, although I doubt that, honestly. I don't think that that's something to really be concerned about as far as composition goes. And even if you're worried about that in regards to mixing, I think there are ways that you can combat that, although or make up for it, although I personally don't know how you would go about that, since I don't know much about mixing. I look like Paul Gilbert. I guess so. I need to stretch this thing out. Richie Kotzen. I don't know that name. False relation. Isn't that a classical term? I feel like I've heard it before. No, don't go that high. No. If anyone's curious, I'm using Elixir strings. Plans for upcoming videos. I've got a few videos in mind. I'm not sure when I'm going to make them. I've been talking with a couple people a little bit about something pretty exciting. I don't know if I'm actually going to go through with it, but it's a really interesting idea. I don't want to talk about it here, but if we do go through with it, you'll be seeing a lot more videos. Nolly, I'll tell you later. I haven't told anybody aside from the two that I've... Yes. There you go, Andrew. Why is this... I can't use that as a... My other guitar here is in D standard, and I tuned the G string up from F just to use to tune my guitar. Switch from doing covers to trying some basic theory videos just to switch it up. Yeah. Good, Nolly. That's important. Yeah. He showed me the score. Okay, I have to clip this thing off now. I assume I'm done tuning this thing up. Do you know if you can change the name of your channel, or would you have to start a new channel entirely? Yeah, you can change it. I think you can only change it once. But you can. Yeah, it does. Floyd roses are annoying in that sense, but once they are in tune, they're in tune. And they stay that way. Which is pretty great. My Strat, like, if I use Elixir strings, and, like, when they say, like, they last a long time, they last a long time. The only reason my strings break on my Floyd Rose equipped guitars is because I'm always abusing the tremolo, like, constantly. Like, all the time. And on my Strat, which doesn't have a tremolo system, I'm like, I've never broken a string on that guitar since I started using elixirs. And I'll bend up like 2 steps all the time and everything. So, I mean, I don't know. Bridge is tilted forward a little bit, so I don't have quite the range that I normally have, but it's okay. does the verse go? Yeah, I'm not super fond of the modulation back to the verse, but to the chorus is nice. Where's my pick? Hold on. Any tips for writing a melody? No. I mean, melody writing isn't something that I know how to formulate. You might ask Nolithium, who's in this chat right now, or Saxophone of Time in the Ongaku Concept Discord, because both of them could answer that better than I could. As for me, I just kind of put myself in a mind state where, well, I do this with everything, where melodies can just kind of come to me, and I just develop those. And if I can do that, then the chords will just come to me. Because I don't have any trouble harmonizing things. So, because to me, the melodies just suggest chords anyways. I'll hear chords in my head underneath them. So it doesn't, that's not the hard part for me. The hard part is coming up with a melody. And as for that, I just, I don't really think about it at all, theoretically. Not to say that that's not useful. Do you recommend putting chromatic notes in the melody, bass, or inner voices if they're applicable? I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to answer that question because I just hear melodies in my head and I just write them down. And whatever comes of that, comes of that. And I don't really think about what I'm doing when I write those. So, like, I'll come up with a melody now. So, I mean, like... He's a J-pop composer. He tweeted something along the lines of, "You know what's wrong with your music. Don't try and convince yourself that don't try and convince yourself otherwise. Like, you know what's wrong. You just don't want to go through the effort to fix it. It's not necessarily that you know how to fix it, but like that thing that you're not sure about, it's like, yeah, you need to scrap it or change it or replace it or whatever." And in my experience, he's right. Like, I know what's wrong with the music that I'm working on, and I know, okay, I have to scrap this and do something else. It's just that I don't want to do that, and that's the hard part. Okay, so my guitar is reasonably well in tune now, and I have things I need to do, so thank you for joining me, and I'll do another stream at some point soonish, within the next week for sure. If you want to continue the conversation, please head over to the OC Discord. I think there's a link in the description, and you can talk to like